All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to PMP Live. I'm Alan Watkey, an event coordinator with Politics and Prose. Thank you for joining us in this virtual format in the midst of these extraordinary times, throughout all of which we strive to continue to bring you the authors you love and their new books to our Politics and Prose community. At any point during the event, you can click on the link in the chat that I'll put there to purchase While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel on Politics and Prose's website. Today, you can ask Ahmed the question by clicking on the Q&A link, which can be found near the bottom of your screen. And finally, we want to thank you all for being here with us today. We're so thankful to our family of loyal customers, keeping our business and our spirits afloat. I'd like to welcome to PMP Live, Ahmed Badr, celebrating his new book, While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel. Stories, poetry, and art from young refugees around the world. It's a groundbreaking collection of poetry, personal narratives, and art from refugees around the world. Ahmed is a poet and social entrepreneur working to combine poetry, archival material, and multimedia to explore the complexities of migration, identity, and self-expression, with a focus on reframing and reclaiming the power of tragedy. Ahmed founded Narratio as a team, which is an organization that activates, supports, and highlights the creative expression of displaced young people through fellowships, workshops, publishing, and partnerships. He's addressed the United Nations on more than 10 occasions, and his work has been recognized by NPR, BuzzFeed, Global Citizens, among others. Ahmed will be joined in conversation today with Ari Shapiro, one of the hosts of All Things Considered with NPR since 2015. He was NPR's justice correspondent for 5 years during the W. Bush administration, covering debates over surveillance, detention, and interrogation in the years after September 11th, as well as 4 years as NPR's White House correspondent during President Obama's first and second terms, and 2 years as NPR's international correspondent. We're so pleased to have both of you here. Please welcome to PMP Live, Ahmed Badr and Ari Shapiro. Welcome, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan, and hi, Ahmed, it's so good to see you.
Likewise, Ari, always a pleasure.
We should tell people that we met years ago at a Seder in New York that was organized by, among others, Benj Pasek, the Tony and Oscar-winning composer of Dear Evan Hansen and all kinds of movie soundtracks. And it's a very strange story of how we entered each other's lives, but it's been amazing to see your journey since then.
Thank you so much, Ari. Yeah, it seems like a lifetime ago that event happened, but I'm so grateful to have been part of it and so grateful to have been on this journey with you, with your support.
And I also really want to thank Politics and Prose for making this event happen. Anytime I have an opportunity to read a book that is not for work, I purchase it from Politics and Prose. It's really nice to have such a thriving local independent bookstore. So Ahmed, I love this book. I love what it contains and the larger messages that it delivers. And I think the best way to talk about it is to first start talking about your own story, and then talk a little bit about the stories that the book tells, and then kind of end on the larger project that this book is a part of. Because as Alan mentioned, you do so much, from poetry to speaking at the UN to this book to workshops with refugees around the world. And so I want to kind of situate this book in context as well. And then at the end, we'll have about 20 minutes for audience Q&A. So to begin, will you just give us like a brief biographical sketch of how your family arrived in the US and what the early part of your life was like?
Absolutely. So I was born in Baghdad in 1998. And in 2006, our home was attacked. It was bombed. A week later, we moved to Syria, which was at the time taking in refugees. I stayed in Syria for 2 years, first in Aleppo and then on a small town on the coast of Syria. And then during those 2 years, we applied for refugee status. And we were very, very lucky to be among the 1% of all refugees that are resettled. And so we landed in the US on May 19th, 2008. And went from Syria to Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
And you were how old in 2008?
2008, my goodness, I was 9 going on 10, yeah.
And how much at 9 did you understand about this journey?
Not very much. I think it was just a new place. I didn't really understand migration. I didn't understand what it meant to be displaced or even the word refugee. I think as a kid, I was just, worried about the friends I was leaving behind, kind of the communities that I had been a part of. So to me, it was just moving from one place to another. And I remember when we found out that we were going to the US, I thought it was like a cab ride away. I didn't think it was that far, and ended up being a bit further than that.
Was there a particular moment that you found art, poetry, self-expression, and found the role that it could play in your life?
It started in high school. A family friend encouraged me to write about my family story. And at the time, I was just trying to figure out, or began the process of trying to figure out all these different identities that I held, whether, as an Iraqi American Muslim refugee. I thought, okay, well, what does it mean to be all of these things at once? And what does it mean to kind of work with the tensions between each and the intersections between each? And so it started by that encouragement. And then I started, writing just some poetry, but mostly essays. And I started a small blog during my sophomore year. And that blog was created for a conference, a journalism conference in Washington. And when I went to that conference, it was a week long, hosted by George Mason. We met with journalists. We met with folks that are really at the forefront of storytelling in different ways. And then I realized this process of trying to figure out what it meant to be Iraqi American Muslim refugee was of interest to other people, and that there were other people that were trying to figure it out themselves. And so that was kind of the initial impetus to create that blog, and then to create an organization inspired by that, that's dedicated to creating spaces for young people who can publish their work in ways that feel authentic to them.
And that organization is called Narratio. Tell us what Narratio is.
Yeah, so Narratio was born about a year after that conference, and I had kind of seen the power of storytelling through my own personal work in that blog, and thought, okay, well, this was nice, but this is just for me. Why not make it something that's more widely available? And so the organization really started just as an online platform, for my classmates in high school to publish their work. I remember, just begging my classmates to publish their poems or writing on the platform.
So not specifically for refugees at all.
No, not initially. I mean, it's still, our focus now is on displaced communities, but we publish the work of young people from all over the world, displaced or otherwise. And so really it started, very small, and just trying to kind of encourage folks, classmates, reaching out to people on Instagram whose work I found inspiring, and saying, hey, we have this platform, and, would you like to contribute? Would you like to be part of this community? And then it turned to workshops. So taking into account not just the online platform, but going and collaborating with different institutions, whether that's resettlement agencies or universities or museums, and really working with displaced young people and young people in general around storytelling and the power of storytelling to empower and to give space to powerful stories on those individuals' own terms.
Will you parse that phrase, the power of storytelling, to empower and give space? Like, what is the power of storytelling actually? Like, what's the value? What's the benefit of doing this?
So first, it was, trying to figure out what it meant to be part of these different identities. And so by sharing my own story, I learned my own relationship to the world and my place within it. It was a situating force where I realized, okay, well, I'm here now. I am trying to figure out these different identities. We've moved around quite a bit. What does it mean to be on the move? What does it mean to be part of these different identities? And then once I had the chance and the opportunity and the support from so many amazing humans to share that story, I felt, first of all, it felt confidence enough in my own journey to claim it as my own first, and then to be able to articulate it, which is something I'm still trying to figure out. But the articulation of the story is so powerful, but just as powerful is realizing that you have a story to tell in the first place. And so once both of those things happened, then I thought, okay, well, why not create platforms where other young people can do the same, where, it's not just my story, but it's the spaces that my story can create for other stories to exist, beyond it, beside it, and really give opportunity, and not necessarily just, when we're meeting with someone that's happened to be displaced, I'm not coming in and saying, tell me your displacement story. I'm just saying, what story would you like to tell?
Mm.
Here's the opportunity to do that. And so the entire work is focused on the idea of how do you transcend the tragedy that you may have experienced as someone who happens to be displaced. And here are all these tools to hopefully do that. And so whenever I like to say, whenever I'm working with displaced young people, I'm not, giving them anything new. I'm just activating something they already have.
You talk about claiming and situating your story. We all have a stereotype of the refugee story in our head. How does the story that you claimed for yourself compare or respond to or contradict or overlap with that kind of pre-existing refugee narrative, if you know what I mean?
I think it tries to expand what we think about when we hear that word refugee. It goes beyond kind of the instinctive kind of violence and the war and the pain that's associated with that word, and it expands that narrative and transcends it, hopefully. So when I share my story, I'm sharing what happened to make us leave home, but also I'm talking about everything that happened after that. What so often happens is that that's where the story starts and ends. This person left home, they left home because of this reason, and that's it. And so with my own personal story, I realized that it's important to expand that. And it's already, and the really interesting point here is that the story already continues, right? It's just what part of the story you tend to focus on. And the dominant narrative tends to overwhelmingly focus on the tragedy and on the pain. And so, for so many individuals around the world who happen to be displaced, their stories, they don't have ownership over their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, whether it's a different kind of institution or journalism, journalists, what have you, whatever entity is trying, that has to benefit from a specific narrative around displacement, comes into a camp or meets with someone that's displaced, and it's an extractive process often. And so all of this work is aimed at combating that and offering really thoughtful and purposeful opportunities for these individuals to tell their own stories in ways that feel authentic to them. And beyond just the expression of that story, linking those individuals with institutions that are controlling this narrative, so that are shaping it in different ways. So I really firmly believe that when we talk about displacement, the individuals who are talking about it should be those individuals experiencing it themselves, in collaboration with folks that maybe haven't, but it has to be focused on that and those individuals and their perspective and what they're bringing in, to that conversation, rather than saying this is an agenda. Where do you fit into this agenda? And let's then tell that story that way.
You're reminding me of a moment I was reporting in Bodrum, Turkey, and met an engineer who had worked on hotels in Dubai, and he was escaping Syria, paid a human trafficker to take him across the ocean to Greece. And I took him to tea, and because he wasn't going to get the call till the middle of the night. And we had a conversation, and at the end I went to pay the bill, and he was really indignant, and he was like, "You don't think that just because I'm a refugee I'm poor, do you?" And I was like, "No, I think I have an expense account. Let me pay for your tea." But that sense of people bristling at being pigeonholed and a journalist swooping in and trying to superimpose a narrative, which is what makes you the perfect person to have created this book. So before we get into what's between the covers, why is this the book you decided to write? I mean, you could have written a memoir, you could have written a collection of your own art. There are any number of directions you could have taken a book project. Why was this the book project you chose?
Yeah, so for the first, few years when I was trying to figure out my own personal story, I tried different ways of doing that. Part of it was, the public speaking. I had early draft of a memoir, and I was wrestling with that. But, I realized that process was more so trying to kind of preserve everything that we had gone through and preserve those memories that were trying to slip away. And then about, I think the start of college, I realized, okay, well, I need to focus on the spaces that my story creates. I didn't just want to be that inspirational refugee that went to these events and told the story and then left. I wanted to connect that story to the work. The story is the work. They're not two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this book is the culmination of all of those efforts, all of those workshops, all of those incredible humans I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with. And it celebrates those individuals in ways that are hopefully thoughtful and engaging. And so it's more so, I'm trying to just, move away from just saying, this is my story and that's it, but saying this is my story and these are the different spaces that my story has led me into. And here's how we can systematically create more spaces like this. And so, I don't want to be the exception. I don't want my story to be the exception. And this book was, or is saying, it's like out there now. It's crazy to think about it in the past tense. But this book is a way of honoring all those amazing humans and moving away from kind of the more individualistic, displacement story that, just dominates all the time. So this is not to say that I'm not interested in doing a memoir or doing something that's more so focused on my work, but I wanted to do this first. It was very important for me to do this first, to first of all honor everyone that has gotten me to this point. It's funny, they joke around that every time first authors, their acknowledgements are like the longest. It's like they thank like the person who paid for a meal like when they were 7. But it really, I think, especially with this kind of book, like there's so many individuals that help make it possible and such a collective project. And so as I was putting it together, I realized, oh my goodness, like this is, because we don't often think about every single person that helped us, create a project and bring it to light. Everyone, especially with this project where it was multiple countries, multiple kind of moments, multiple locations. And so really, it's such a collective project. And I wanted to do this first to pay homage to everyone who has gotten me to this point, but also, raise other voices and other stories in that process.
Tell us about the process that led to so many of the works that are in this book. They came out of workshops that you did all over the world. Describe that for us.
Yeah, so it started in Greece. So I spent about 3 months in Greece, traveling around in camps, outside of camps, really working on workshops that I had done previously, but have been just kind of one-off workshops here and there across the US. But I wanted with this project to meet with folks that are both resettled in the US and then folks that were trying to figure it out, that are kind of in limbo. And initially I wanted to go to multiple countries. I thought I was going to go to Greece first, then to Sweden, then to Germany and all these countries. And then once I got to Greece, I realized, depth is way more important here. I needed to spend much more time here than, a month in 4 countries, is not as powerful as a month in one or 3 months in one. And so I was really, really lucky to have met so many incredible humans who helped me figure out this book as well, in the beginning, because I had an idea in my mind of, going to camps, outside of camps, doing interviews, workshops with folks, but I wanted to do it in a way that, wasn't repetitive from anything I'd done before. And I wanted it to be informed by those individuals themselves. Again, I didn't want to come in and say, here's what we're doing. What do you want to say? We're going to do this with it. So I wanted to be clear about what the project was, but have that clarity be derived from those individuals that were going to be included in the project, not the other way around. And so, I traveled to Greece, starting the summer of 2018. And this is kind of where it all began. I had friends of friends, 2 amazing humans, Jabran and Neve, who I think are watching today. Really, really wonderful, wonderful humans who helped guide me through the context in Greece, but also connect with different communities there in ways that, again, are accessible and thoughtful. And so I spent some time north of Athens, and then in Athens, a bit of time in the islands as well, and in Chios, and then came back to the US, with all of the different materials, poems, artwork, stories, and then traveled to Trinidad and Tobago with UNHCR. And at the time, there was they had a crisis, and it's still to a point still there, a crisis where they didn't know what their immigration policy was. Trinidad and Tobago, when people oftentimes think of it, they don't think of Venezuelan refugees coming in. It's just something I've never had to deal with before. So I had the opportunity to travel there and do some workshops there. And Amanda, who helped organize it with UNHCR, is also here with us. It was such an incredible trip, just because when we think about that displacement narrative, it's unfortunately displacement doesn't discriminate. It's all over this world, whether it's Syria, whether it's Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's the southern border. Displacement is there, unfortunately, all over the place. And as of World Refugee Day in June, now 80 million people, 1% of the world's population, are displaced in some way, shape, or form. So this number unfortunately keeps on growing. And the work in Trinidad was to, again, and personally, I had never worked with that population before. So it was really, really eye-opening, and we had some incredible workshops there. And then came back to the US and launched the Narratio Fellowship with Professor Bryce Nordquist at Syracuse University. And really, this fellowship was a way of making the workshops that I had done in Greece and in Trinidad more of a program. I had done all these one-off workshops, but I wanted to create a program that really, took all of those lessons and worked with a specific cohort of young people that have experienced displacement, and create this program where they can express themselves in ways that felt authentic to them, and in ways where they can connect with all these different institutions to share their voices on the global stage.
So let's talk about some of the specific contributors, starting with you, because some of your work is in here. Would you read something that you, I guess it doesn't have to be something that you contributed to the book. Would you read something of your own?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm putting you on the spot here. I don't think I told you I was going to ask you to do that.
You didn't. No, it's okay.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. So, and that's one thing I can talk about it afterwards, but it was a struggle to try and figure out what my role was in this book. I didn't want to distract from any of the other works, but I wanted to hopefully have my voice be a mediator between them, because they all can stand on their own. So this is, I guess I'll read the first one, the first poem of mine in here, or is it the second, excuse me. It's called The Invitation to the Displaced, and it's a short one, so let's read this one. An Invitation to the Displaced. We are representations of a past we were deprived of embracing. Planets framing a lonely moon painted by the chosen few. Rough and soft hands, empty clasped fists, shaping stories until the spaces between our fingernails begin to whisper, "You were meant to be here earlier, but welcome to your rightful place. Write as you wish, tell your stories, I will gather your audience."
That's a beautiful invocation for what the book itself is. Did you find, as you were working with these young artists, that they took naturally to the kind of self-expression that you had discovered over the years, or did you have to sort of nudge them along and help them find these ways of expressing themselves?
It's a little bit of both. I think, and through every workshop and through every interview, one thing that I found to be really, really powerful is that you start by sharing your own perspective and your own kind of journey. Like, individuals want to know how you got there in the first place to be in front of them, and I feel like being honest about my own experience, my own background, and really just being honest about what this project is trying to achieve, and having it be, again, an invitation. The poem's called An Invitation to This Place. But really, even more than that, meeting folks where they're at and saying, and this was difficult in the beginning because it wasn't as, the specificity wasn't there immediately, right? If you're coming in and saying, hey, what story would you like to tell? What medium would you like to tell it in? First, and I experienced this personally too, where it was like, well, am I a poet? Am I a writer? In the early beginning, I thought, okay, well, poetry has to be this very specific thing. And once I figured out that, no, that's not the case, it could be whatever you want it to be, I tried to carry that energy through, to the workshops and to those meetings where, really acknowledging and highlighting that artwork and storytelling and these different mediums are there to serve you, are there for you to use in whichever way you would like. And for many of the folks I worked with, and especially in Greece, they were surprised that I was even there in the first place. And it's not often that someone who is formerly displaced comes back to a place where displacement is actively happening,
right?
Engaging with that community. And so, there are, several funny moments there where it's like, well, why are you back? You made it. You made it out here.
You got out, right?
Yeah. And so, but again, I think that goes just as a testament to how kind of necessary these kinds of projects are.
How would you answer that question? When somebody in a refugee camp in Greece would say, why are you back? You made it out. What answer would you give?
I would laugh. I would laugh and say, well, this is, I enjoy this work, and I enjoy meeting folks, and I enjoy, connecting over stories, and it's difficult, because it's, I didn't want it to be a big deal. I didn't want it to be this kind of revolutionary thing. I was just there meeting with folks, and, befriending folks, and meeting incredible humans, and meeting them as I would have met any other person, right? So I didn't want the spectacle of the project to distract from the expression and the point of this, because the point of this is not to come in and say, hey, you're a refugee, do you have a story? I have this book, let's do it. That's not the point. The point is, I'm Ahmed, I'm here to do this book. Are you interested in this? And let's have a conversation. And so I think having that entry point is really, really important. And just, again, being honest about what the project is and my own connection to it, but also really critically here, like recognizing that my experience with displacement may have been very different from theirs. I'm not coming in and saying, oh, I know exactly what it means to live in a camp. My family never spent time in a camp. And so, and we're, very lucky. So being forward about that, and meeting folks where they are, was a key thing. And I think it made for even more powerful book, because again, you have to meet folks where they're at, and be prepared.
Yeah, I want to remind people who are watching that they can contribute questions to the Q&A, and we will take questions in about 10 minutes. But first, will you introduce us to one of the contributors? Tell us about somebody who you met in the process of making this book, whose work is going to stay with you.
Oh my goodness, all of them. I think all of them will stick with me.
Easy.
I think all of them, but Myrna, I think Myrna Aslan is one of the individuals who has several artworks in here, drawings and paintings, and I think every single
work.
Yeah, there we go. There's Myrna. And I think I met, Myrna in Athens, and we're doing a workshop at the Greek National Library. And we were the first during that, a cohort of young people. We were the first to use the recording studios actually at the National Greek Library. It had just been rebuilt, just south of Athens in the port. And her work was so powerful, and her work wasn't necessarily just produced during that specific workshop, but we had worked together in that workshop, and she said, oh, I have all these different artworks, would you like to consider these in the book? And so the power of her artwork, the power of her own story, but also she was really unapologetic about her creativity. She talks about having seeing art and seeing kind of the paintbrush as a way of, there she is, as a way of really expressing herself, but in a way of expressing herself in a way that's powerful and filled with agency. So she really embodies the point of this book, and that like storytelling should be available to everyone, and should be able to really amplify the work of communities and the individuals within them. I want to read real quick the kind of the intro for her that kind of features what it's like right before the works, right before the artwork. Let's see, Myrna. I should like memorize where everything is by this point, right, Ari?
I am disappointed in you for not knowing the exact page number.
There it is. So Myrna. So the kind of little piece before her artwork says, Myrna believes in art's power to provide agency and self-trust. She began drawing at 5 years old, using colored pencils to create stories through sketches. During one of our workshops, I asked Myrna if her art could speak to her, what would it say? And she replied, it would say, sketch. Let out what's inside you. I'm your paper, I am your colors, I am your dreams. I will make you feel in your heart and your mind that you can achieve whatever it is you want. As you get bigger, I will get bigger alongside you. And so Myrna,
that's so
is just
beautiful.
Incredible.
How many of the contributors have you kept in touch with?
Most.
Wow.
I think and this was something that I wish I had done a better job of. I mean, it's so difficult because everyone is in a different place, but in a different place where they might not have access to, a stable internet connection or all of these different things. But, Facebook has been very helpful. Instagram has been helpful, but I've tried, the best of my ability to keep in touch with folks as much as I can. And with the Narratio Fellows, that's we worked together for a year or so, and so I've been able to keep in touch with them, much more. But yeah, I've tried my best to connect with everyone, but I could always be doing a better job.
I'm not judging you. As we've explained, this book is sort of one tentacle on a multi-tentacled octopus. And I would love for you to tell us about another part of the project that involved a collaboration with the Metropolitan Museum in New York, which is just such a cool story. Will you tell us about it?
Sure, yeah. So the Narratio Fellowship started in 2019, summer of 2019. Professor Bryce Nordquist at Syracuse University, my co-creator, co-director of the program, and had traveled to Syracuse the previous fall to do a lecture and a workshop at the university. And I connected with the Northside Learning Center, an amazing literacy center in Syracuse that serves anyone from ages of 5 to 85, and primarily immigrant community of the North Side. And we did a workshop there. It was a snow day. A snow day in upstate New York is really a snow day.
Yeah.
We
not like Aleppo.
No, just a bit different. And we had like 50 folks show up of all different ages, and we did this incredible workshop. And I got back to school, and a few months later, I reached out to Professor Nordquist, and I we pitched this program. So what if we make a program that's based in the at the North Side in collaboration with the university and then the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which I had connected with earlier on. And so the collaboration was that we'd have a month. It's a year-long fellowship for a group of 10 to 12 displaced young people that resettled to the U.S. and children of immigrants, and all ages between 17 to 21. And we have this program that has a month-long residential component in the summer, where we introduce them to different forms of storytelling, whether it's podcasting or poetry or photography. And the first cohort was specifically focused on poetry. And what the kind of the output of it was each fellow picked an object from the ancient Near East galleries at the Met and then reimagined their labels as a poem. And again, taking into account their own personal stories and their own identities, not necessarily talking about displacement at all. And then we traveled to New York, and they got to perform those poems at the Royal Assyrian Court at the Met. And they really, got to share their work beyond then as well. They performed at the UN. They had an exhibit at Christie's in February before everything changed. And we just launched a second cohort. We did a hybrid virtual and in-person model this summer, focused on filmmaking. And we want to kind of continue spreading that program. And the Met just profiled the program for their Met Stories series, and will be featured as part of their 150th celebration next week, Thursday, from 6 to 7 Eastern.
That's such an amazing collaboration. Can you share one of the pieces in the book that came out of that?
Yeah, so I think we'll be releasing. So one thing that I've thought a lot about in terms of as I continue to share this work and as I continue to share the work within it, is that a key part of it is that those individuals who are within it that are featured are able to share their work themselves, right? And so with the Met Stories episode, we were able to kind of do that and feature the work of some of those individuals. So I'll read a tiny bit of one of the pieces, and then we can go from there. This is, let's see. I'm gonna read a bit from Nida. Nida, who I think I may have seen her in the participants. So Nida is one of our fellows from 2019, originally from Syria. And let me find this page. Ari, help me, please.
Okay, I'm finding Nida. And if she is watching and she knows what page she's on, 84. She can just tell us in the chat, and we'll flip right to
84. It. I got you. 84. There's Nida.
Here we go.
Perfect. So I'll read the intro to Nida, and then I'll read just a couple of stanzas from her work.
Yeah.
So Nida's 19. She's originally from Syria. Nida Al-Jabarin. So as one half of the first set of Al-Jabarin twins, the family has two. Nida is a natural storyteller with a love for Syrian history and heritage. Through her work, she hopes to provide a full picture of the country, one that includes not only the pain and destruction, but also the resilience, beauty, and humanity within its citizens and cities. And so her poem's called The Day I Left. And on the Narratio site, there's a fellowship tab where you can go in and see the object that she had selected that inspired this poem. But I'll read just a couple of stanzas. The Day I Left. يا بيت جدي ضاع المفتاح وابوابك تبكي على الراح. Oh grandfather, our house key is lost, and the doors cry for those who left. I wake up and my eyes immediately forget the taste of a good sleep. I look around wondering what is there left to see. I see my grandmother, the vessel, and the house key. I look at the vessel, not understanding what I see. I see my grandfather's eyes as he prepares to face his tears. As he prepares to face his fears that we're all leaving like drops of tears. I walk out of the house not knowing why I must leave. Everyone holds my hands, giving me something I need. Then my grandfather asks me, where is the house key? And so I'll leave it at that. And we're having, a key thing here too is that we have more of these events. Well, the fellows will be featured and they'll be reading themselves. So
this is great. It's a good way to sell books. Give a cliffhanger. If you want to know where the house key is, you have to buy the book and read the end of the poem yourself to get the answer. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make light of what is actually a really beautiful, heartfelt piece of art. This is one step in a lifelong journey that you've been on. This book is. So where is the journey going from here? I know you already have 4 projects underway. Tell us about what the next steps are.
First, I need a break, Ari. I need to take a step back. So maybe in November, December, I'll take a
You've been the
back.
busiest person in lockdown, I know. You graduated from college remote while publishing a book. You're now on a global Zoom tour.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a few interesting months. But I think I really want to continue doing this work, but I want to continue doing it in a way that is, evolving. Again, I want to keep pushing the envelope, keep thinking about, this work in ways that are thoughtful and ways that continue to challenge the narrative, but also create new opportunities for new narratives to exist. So, I'm going to continue my work with Narratio, and we hope to scale the fellowship so we have more cohorts of fellows and have more opportunities there. Thinking about next projects, next book projects. I don't know what that's going to be. My dad's already asking me, like, what's going to be? What is it going to be the next one? In the best way. He's no pressure.
Right. Right. The loving father.
Absolutely. And so thinking about, what is next, what is, with my own personal story, I might dive back into that a little bit. I'm not sure, but I'm very grateful to be in a space where I can consider the different options and to think about a next step and maybe grad school next year. I don't know. Maybe I'll apply. I don't know. Lots up in the air. But in the meantime, I'm just so honored to be able to share this work with the world and to have really thoughtful conversations like this one around it and around the people that are in it.
Oh, if people want to contribute to Narratio or donate, is there a way they can do that?
Yeah, so just narratio.org, everything is in there. So if people can submit their work, and we're about to really announce a really interesting and exciting collaboration for us in the next few weeks, and that'll help us scale the work all over the world. So it's growing, and we're continuously publishing work. Now we publish work from over 18 countries and have an amazing team of contributors. So if you're interested, please join us.
Well, I personally find it so incredible and inspiring that when you had an opportunity to use this platform you've built and use your voice, you decided to share that opportunity with so many other people rather than keeping it for yourself. I think it says a lot about you that over all of this time that you have sort of earned the right to have people listen to you. When given the opportunity to say something, you turned it around and said, what does everybody else want to say? So let's go to questions. I am on my iPad, so I have to touch the screen here and open up the Q&A function. And the first question from Dustin says, how do you see the power of storytelling encouraging empathy and respect?
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. Dustin is the U.S. Youth Observer to the UN. He's a wonderful, wonderful friend.
Thank you
for
for
the thoughtful
tuning in,
question.
Dustin.
Yeah, and so I think the empathy and respect are very, very important when we think about storytelling, because when we think about how a story is shared, what happens to encourage that individual to share their story and all the space in between. First, it's inspires empathy and respect for the individual who's expressing it, and then to everyone who is, taking in that story, the audience. So I think obviously it depends on what kind of story you're sharing and how personal that story is, but I think generally speaking, when we think about, what storytelling evokes and what it can make possible, empathy and respect are at the top of that list.
The next question is, it's so wonderful to see so many different forms of art presented in the beautiful book. How do you think this variety of art adds to the message of the book? It's a really interesting question. And I know you also have used a variety of art forms. You did an incredible collaborative art project called Unpacked that in small suitcases recreated homes that refugees had left behind. You also write poems. How does the variety of art forms contribute to the overall project?
So logistically, it was challenging with the book, right? So in trying to figure out how to, do these stories justice in the different expressions, but how do you put them all together in a way that, helps them each, stand on their own, but makes them really even more powerful together and as a collection. And so in, trying to figure out my own place within the work and whether to include, my own poems in there, I thought about the different mediums that, and it starts with just, what that material that was collected said and what it kind of featured. And it took about a year, working with my editor, Andrews McNeil, and really props to them for being so patient with me and helping me figure it out, and trying to figure out, okay, well, I have my poems, we have artwork, we have paintings, we have poems, we have interviews, how do we put it all together? And the other thing here, beyond just the variety of mediums, you had a variety of ages. How do you put side by side the drawing by a 6-year-old with a poem by a 27-year-old, right? So and it was just so interesting to try and figure out how to do that. And I hope it, worked out. We're very proud of how it turned out. But it's hard because these are precious stories, and it's not lost on me how much responsibility I have and how much trust it took to have all of these works included in the way that they're included. And so, I think the different mediums are an invitation, and they make it possible to express that story in so many different ways. But it also it opens up ways of exploring, this narrative and expanding it. And because the more mediums you have, the more people are going to be able to contribute. Because not everyone wants to write a poem. Not everyone wants to do an interview. But some folks might want to do a drawing. Some folks want to maybe do something much different. So I think ultimately, I'm really happy that we had the different mediums represented, and in the process of trying to put it all together, that was really at the forefront of our minds. How do we make something that's cohesive, but that pays tribute and celebrates everyone and their respective medium?
The next question is, tell us more about the cab ride, which I think might be a reference to when you said you thought the journey to Sioux Falls would be in a taxi.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. Yeah, so we were in a small town on the coast of Syria called Jebla, and we would go back and forth, to Damascus to work on our case and have interviews around the process of resettling is very, very complicated, and there are several really complicated steps for it to happen if you end up even just getting chosen to do it. And so I remember the cab ride. This was kind of the final cab ride, right? Like we were back. So we lived in Aleppo for a year, and then we moved again to the coast, and this is where we left to go. And I remember, we lived at I think like the third or fourth floor, and we had just finished getting everything packed up, and a couple of friends had come in to just kind of say goodbye. And I think about that feeling often of not necessarily knowing what was coming next, but having and not necessarily there's this I don't know how to best to like express it. As a kid, you don't really understand what's going on around you, but you also understand what's going on around you. It's like you have your own lens, you have your own entry point, and you know that something new is coming, something different, something unknown, and you try to just hold on to that familiarity. And so I remember right before we got into that ride, looking back at my friends and thinking, okay, well, I will likely never see these individuals again, and just wanting to not even just think about the fact that I might never see them again. And so, I don't remember that cab ride too much, but what I do remember is just kind of that initial departure. And then from there, going to the airport, and that experience was completely new too. And went from Damascus to Budapest to New York City, and then New York City spent the night in New York City, and then went to Chicago, and then finally Chicago to Sioux Falls. And so it's quite the journey, to even just get there logistically. But that cab ride was, it's just a moment of transition that I thought I knew what we were getting into, but I didn't think I did at all.
And have you been back since, or have you connected with any of those people even over, I don't know, Skype or FaceTime?
Yeah, so we went back to Iraq in 2015, just to see family, and we hadn't been back, for several years. And I think in terms of connecting, we've always been in touch, with FaceTime and Viber and Facebook. It's something that we have always really kept up. And I think going back was really, really interesting too, because we had, when we left, I was so young, and I was coming back, as a 17-year-old, right before college. Yeah, so 17, 18-year-old. And when you meet folks that you remember in your past, but when you last met, you were a kid and they were kids too. And then now everybody is older and has full beards. When we went back, my beard was so sad, but now it's a bit better. But you go back and you try to match up the memories with the present, right? You're like, oh, I remember this cousin, and now we're, how he's older, and now we're just trying to figure it out. But ultimately, I think it was a struggle just to try and, it was a wonderful, wonderful trip, and I appreciate it so much, but it was difficult sometimes where we would talk about, with my cousins, where it's like, we talk about everything we've been through, everything we had been up to. And I felt like kind of this guilt of, my answer to that question is very different than theirs, and we've had different set of opportunities. And so really, that made me think a lot about, the work as a whole, and then thinking, okay, well, I have this enormous privilege, and I have to create different spaces for different stories to exist. But also, again, in meeting folks where they're at, and in this case, it was deeply personal. This was obviously before the Greek travels, before the book, before any of this. And having those conversations with my cousins, I was reminded of, again, my privilege, but also how much work I needed to do to turn that guilt into responsibility, and to, work within that and create spaces for those different stories to exist. So, it's a responsibility, and it's not a responsibility that is heavy per se. I welcome it, I honor it, and I hope that, through this book and the work as a whole, that responsibility is really, it manifests in a way that is powerful. But yeah, it's recognition of privilege, but also recognizing that you are where you used to be is not necessarily where you are now. And so how do you bridge everything in between?
Yeah. This next question is a little bit long, so you can take a drink of water while I read it. Thank you, Ahmed. I work in refugee resettlement. My experience vacillates between some of our largely white, fairly affluent supporters demanding to hear refugee stories and not always wanting to leave their white savior complex behind. And then with those who want to speak on behalf of refugees, thinking they're doing good by giving a voice to the voiceless, as if refugees don't have their own voice. Also with racism prejudice favoring certain refugees over others to support and resettling them in our city, Syrians before the ban versus Congolese, for example. Very hard to get them engaged too on social media in refugees and displaced from Central and South America in particular. It's like a binary between good refugees versus bad. Not sure what the heck my question is, but I was wondering your thoughts on this, the racism that manifests itself in various ways in our work in welcoming refugees in the US, and how racism and religious bigotry impacts young refugees you have worked with. Lots to chew on there.
Yeah. I think I'd love to start with the kind of the voice for the voiceless, trope, and something that I whenever I encounter it in my work, something I try to really just clarify to folks that's not the way we should be talking about this issue and the individuals that represent or that we might be talking about. The issue of representation is a key one, and something I've wrestled with the book, with all of my work, and trying to think about, okay, well, what does it actually mean to create a space where individuals can share their own stories on their own terms? What does that actually look like in practice? And what does allyship look like when we think about storytelling and displacement? And it's something that I'm, trying to continuously figure out and work towards. But I think it starts with recognizing where you're coming from as someone who maybe has never experienced displacement, but is in a place to talk about displacement, or the individuals who have experienced displacement. I think that starting with that place of self-awareness, whether you're a celebrity or whether, person of influence, figuring out, okay, well, what's my connection to this issue? What am I gaining by speaking about this issue? Or what am I adding to the conversation? And then is there someone else that may be better qualified to speak on this issue? And then seeing a place in the middle, because I think allyship and collaboration are really powerful and really important, but we have to be able to be ready to engage with our own privilege and our own kind of baggage, whether regardless of where we're coming from. And so I think it's something that I think about quite a bit, and I try to work with, and I try to kind of wrestle. And it's something that we have a long way to go on, but I think a conversation that we need to have is around kind of the different complexities of allyship and collaboration.
It's interesting. I don't know if you encounter this as a person who is working to amplify voices of displaced people, but I often think in the news business about how much more easily we amplify the voices of displaced people from, say, Syria or Venezuela than from Yemen or Myanmar, because we don't have access to the displaced Yemeni people or the Rohingya people from Myanmar as easily as we do the Syrian and Venezuelan refugees. And so as a result, NPR listeners get what might be a slightly skewed picture of who is experiencing this.
Yeah, and I think it's really difficult too, because part of the challenge is, just like you said, part of it is logistics, right? Like we kind of lack the kind of space or the structure or the system where we can access stories of those who happen to be displaced across a different kind of geography, right? And so, I mean, this book features folks from 11 different countries. And, with the fellowship, the fellows are from different countries as well. So I think we can create different spaces, whether it's through the fellowship or different programs, where we can collaborate with institutions that are shaping this narrative, whether it's NPR, whether it's the Met or the UN, and create kind of a thoughtful pipeline of sorts where people have access to individuals who are, have authority over this narrative and are experts in their own right. But you're right. I think it's a challenging thing, and I think the discrimination of the narrative, it's something, because there's part of it is just talking about the narrative in a way that's three-dimensional, right? Step one, and then it's figuring out how do you do that across multiple countries.
Yeah,
and I think that work is still part of the three-dimensional aspect of it, but it's hard.
Speaking of which, do you also want to address this notion of like the good refugees and the refugees that you do and don't want, and whether people you've worked with have experienced that themselves in the US?
Absolutely. It's such an important thing to talk about, and I want to talk about the Unpacked exhibit too. For that project, we met with Amin Mohammed Hafiz, a Syrian artist and architect. We met with families resettled to the New Haven area, and then produced this multimedia exhibit where I did the audio storytelling, and then Mohammed remodeled each of their homes inside of a series of suitcases. And those individuals that are featured, and this echoes in the book as well, not everyone is necessarily successful in the traditional right. There are folks that are trying to just make ends meet to make sure that their kids can go to school and be safe. That may be they're not all doctors or engineers or what have you. There's individuals who are trying to figure it out and who are just trying to chase their dreams and make a better life for themselves and their families. And so this idea, this binary between good and bad refugee is I think is really harmful, because also when we talk about politics, whether it's on the right or the left, you know, the left might have their list of the good refugees that they always bring up whenever something bad happens. And then on the other side, there's the list of the bad refugees that become. So it's not productive to have that binary. What about the folks that are just trying to live their lives,
Yeah.
you know, and are you know, just want to provide for their families, and who just want to, you know, be safe and be in a stable place. So I think we have to, you know, create that distance we assume about refugees and our own experiences. That distance we need to lessen, and whenever we hear that word, we have to think about it in all of its complexity. And humanity is not just good or bad, you know. Humanity is complicated, and obviously there's wrong and there's right, but we have to kind of move beyond just that binary of good immigrant, the bad immigrant, the good refugee, and bad refugee.
All right, let's take one last question, which comes from Rebecca, and it's a simple one. How does it feel to have a living, breathing piece of work out in the world now? It's a real thing. It's in my hand.
It's a real thing. It exists. It is. Thank you for that question, Rebecca. I think it's still settling in, honestly, Ari. I think you know, friends and so many amazing folks have been so supportive and just supporting the project and engaging with it in such a thoughtful way, and you among them. Thank you so much. And I think the one thing I've been thinking a lot about, and I don't think I'll ever know, there's no way to measure this, but you know, I'm thinking a lot about the individuals who may just find a book randomly, or a friend recommends it to them, and kind of the invisible stuff you don't necessarily see on social media, you know, like, and so I've been thinking a lot about the invisible interactions that the folks will have with the book, ones that I can never imagine and can never anticipate. And so that is just fascinating and mind-blowing, and such an honor to be able to introduce it to the world, and to, you know, celebrate everyone that's in it, and hopefully this is just the beginning.
Well, thank you, and thanks to all of the contributors for this beautiful book. We appreciate your talking with us about it. Thanks to everybody who joined in, and Politics and Prose for making this happen today. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Ahmed and Ari, thank you both so much. This is just a fantastic talk today, and we're so excited to be able to celebrate the release of this beautiful book, and like everyone that's contributed to this. I did put links to purchase While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel in the chat. So please click on that. If you haven't already purchased it, you can do that. I also did put a link to narratio.org in the chat, so you can click on that, and please go, you know, search that out and contribute, donate, just support it, share it. I want to thank everyone. Ahmed and Ari, thank you both again for being here today.
Thank you so much. And we have
Thanks.
book plates, right,
pleasure.
Alan?
Yes, absolutely. There's book plates. So if you've ordered it, it's going to come with the book plate. So that's awesome. We're so excited. Thank you for sending those.
My pleasure.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Take care, everyone. Enjoy the weekend.